What happened, pilot? Amber sighed. She was supposed to make history, not whatever this was. Max and Jane weren't sure either. The Alcubierre tech had started acting up when they had gotten about halfway to Pluto for their test flight. The UHF space piercer was traveling at 2C before the computer started going haywire. The theoretical maximum was about 718C, but the scientists didn't think using the maximum speed with a crewed vessel was a safe idea. Once they'd entered FTL, Amber, Max, and Jane had opened up some fruit punch bottles for a quick celebration. After all, you don't want to get drunk if you're responsible for piloting a $5 billion ship. But it was then that the problems began. Errors showed up on several screens as Max had come running from their quarters. The alarm that was blaring had clearly woken him up, judging by his very unkempt hair. He was testing the effects of Alcubierre space on human sleep, since there was no way to know whether the animal tests would hold up. Rabbits and chimps were able to handle Alcubierre space just fine, though. A few minutes later, Jane opened the door to the botany room. She was half-dressed with protective equipment, while her t-shirt was wrinkled in several places. Amber figured that she'd been trying to struggle out of her beekeeping equipment for nearly a minute. "You should see how the bees reacted to the FTL transition," she exclaimed. "We can talk about that later, Jane," Max said, still breathing heavily. "Amber, what happened?" "I don't know. I'm about to drop us out of FTL so we can get back on Q-comms." They all got to their seats and secured their seatbelts around their chests and legs. "Everyone ready?" Amber asked. "Affirmative," both Jane and Max chorused. Dropping now. There was a sudden feeling of everything twisting. Colors seemed to become brighter for an instant. Amber felt herself get pulled and pushed in every direction. The scientists back at Luna had said this feeling was due to some sort of fluctuation in electromagnetic fields messing with her nerves. Apparently, there was a whole new type of math devoted to Alcubierre spatial equations, though there was a lot of other esoteric science behind transitions to and from Alcubierre space. Almost immediately after exiting Alcubierre space, they got the message. "Space Piercer, we're getting multiple errors in control. Do you know something about this?" "We saw the errors appear while transiting Alcubierre space at 124.3672 minutes after entrance. We're almost exactly halfway to Pluto. In fact, the errors appeared exactly halfway through the journey." "What happened, pilot?" There was a burst of static across the microphone. "We're losing adjust the can you." There was a much longer burst of static. "Thank you for your..." The last bit was cut off completely. Amber looked at Jane, whose face was now quite pale. Amber released her seatbelt and stood up. "Can anyone tell me what the hell just happened?" Jane freed herself from her chair. "I don't know. Maybe the Alcubierre space messed with the Q-com alignment? They ran nearly 1,000 tests on those effects. It doesn't do anything. Something was different this time. Maybe it was us?" suggested Max. "Us? Perhaps it's something to do with our sentience at large. We've only tested Alcubierre jumps on non-sentient creatures until now." Jane nodded. "Well, I'll go take inventory of our food stocks." Amber began thinking about how long they could survive. The oxygen reclamation systems would be the last to go, able to go for a year before breaking down. They had water and waste reclamation systems, but the waste reclamation would only get them through about a week before it lost the nutrient content necessary to sustain them. "We should do an investigation. Amber, did you see which system threw errors first?" "QCOM. Though once we got back to real space, the error message for that one disappeared. It's the only way to communicate with us." "Do you think it was hostile action?" asked Max, unstrapping himself. "If we assume so, then it wouldn't be anyone from Earth, Luna, or Mars. We're all at peace with one another, especially after the aid we sent to that Martian colony. So aliens? Not probable, but possible. If they can hijack Q-comms, though, then they're too powerful for us to fight anyway. What else could explain the errors?" A light appeared in the center of the room. "That would be me." Amber blinked in shock. "What are you and why can you speak? Are you responsible for the problems with our FTL capabilities?" The light grew larger and dimmed from bright white to a dark green. "That, my friends, is why I'm here. My name is Gaia, and I'm going to use you to send a message to humanity." Far away, a probe's virtual intelligence stirred as a message repeatedly flashed in the computer interface. "Spatial jump detected." The virtual intelligence searched through the probe's cameras as a red light pulsed. As the cameras zoomed in, the red light resolved itself into a long line, from a moon of the third planetary body halfway to the ninth planetary body. "System designated 2-383-84927-1567. Star size is 1.1 standard stellar radii. Transmitting." The virtual intelligence forwarded the message to the nearest jump space communications beacon. The tight beam gamma ray would take several standard years to reach it. The virtual intelligence ran a calculation. FTL civilization 18% likely to have linked particle communication jamming abilities. Forwarding message to the Bureau of Military Affairs, the Bureau of Contact Affairs, the Bureau of Scientific Studies, and the Bureau of Bureaucracy. The virtual intelligence slipped back into a slumber of inactivity. The probe turned its sensors to close monitoring of System 2, 383, 84927, 1567. Amber paced around the room with her hands on her hips. So you've been watching us since we were still hooting in the African savannah, and you only decided to interfere now? Yes. Now that you have achieved FTL travel, you are worthy of my attention and direct intervention. Max gave the glowing green orb an indignant look. Why are we only worth your attention now? He asked. There was clear mistrust in his voice, a sentiment Amber wasn't entirely opposed to. I am a selfish being, Gaia said. I did not want to befriend a species so soon, only to have them kneel down and worship me. And you all are so very cute. I wanted to see if you were capable of surviving on your own. Hang on, Jane said. Cute? Yes. All those dreams and desires, those fears, and of course, that little yearning for a mate so many of you have, it's cute. What's your word for it? Ah, yes, it gives me a protective instinct. The problem is that any species I pamper would become weak and dull. I did not want that. So when you flew your planes to bomb your cities, I didn't say a word. When you detonated your atomic bombs during your Second and Third World Wars, I didn't stop you. So you don't care about us, not really. I'm not all-loving and all-knowing, nor all-powerful, if that's what you're implying. My emotions control me just like most other creatures. Like you, my mind is a constant battleground between logic and emotion. But nature is all about tough love. You've survived my strongest hurricanes, my strongest non-supervolcano eruptions, and even my strongest earthquakes, heat waves, and cold snaps. Amber frowned. So let's leave all the ethical questions to the psychologists and philosophers. What will you do now, Gaia? She asked. Make first contact, of course. The virtual intelligence received a new message from the Bureau of Contact Affairs. Closely monitor the 383 84927 1567 system. Move probe position to outer asteroid field of the 383 84927 1567 system. Maintain secrecy and observe the thin atmosphere planets and their moons. Cloaked fusion thrusters fired in the interstellar void. The virtual intelligence ran simulations and calculations on trajectories. The ninth planetary body was actually a nearly binary system. The civilization would likely visit the planetary body within a short period. The virtual intelligence searched for a suitable-sized asteroid to hide the probe. Upon locating it, the route was adjusted by a few increases in thrust. It would take a bit of time, but the probe would reach the system. Sir, we're detecting an anomaly outside the New York UN meeting building. The president rubbed the sleep out of his eyes. Tell me the situation. At 12:32 Earth Standard Time, several cameras showed a large rectangular stone formation slowly rise from the ground. Pieces of the stone began to sink back down into the ground at 12:36. At 12:50, the stone looked like this. The informant handed the president a tablet. In the middle of the garden sat clear English letters. Bring your leaders to this building. I want to have a chat. President Feldrum leaned back in his chair and straightened his tie. Any organizations claiming responsibility? No, but the news is already all over it. There's nearly 1,000 drones hovering outside the perimeter we set up for it. We've tried to keep the reporters themselves outside the perimeter too. Have you done analysis on the stone? Yes. It is 50% hematite, 50% barite. Exactly. There have been no other minerals found in the stone besides this. Do a full chemical and electromagnetic sweep. Call the Chinese and Russians. See if they know something about it. Right away, Mr. President. President Feldrum sighed. He wondered how much political turmoil the new event was going to generate. It was surprising how trivial things could suddenly become massively polarizing topics when they were connected to world leaders. It's too early in the morning for this. All we had to do was turn on the FTL again after angling the ship back at Earth? Amber yelled. Was it really that simple? She didn't think that was the best idea, but they were out of any others. The crew had no access to communications. The radio and laser communications were still not responding, and the crew didn't have the tools to fix them. Gaia said, yes, it should be that simple, but we'll be able to jump soon. Why not now? Sorry, I had to get my message across to the others. Transmitting my power across this level of distance causes the problems in your technology. The others? The leaders of your nations. Max laughed. Oh, of course. Let me just hop over back to Earth and make me sing your praises. Smart. Gaia focused their light on him. You know, if I wanted you dead, I would have simply crashed you into Pluto. You're not very good at currying favors, are you, Gaia? Max asked as he strapped in. Amber sighed. Can we save the argument for later? I've got to input the coordinates and do all the procedures for entering Alcubierre space. Jane placed her hand on Max's forehead. I'll make it worth your while after we get back to Earth, she almost purred. Max sighed. Don't think that's going to work every time, Jane. Jane moved over to her own seat. I don't think it will work every time, she said. I know it will. Amber rolled her eyes and continued checking the systems. Most of the errors had disappeared, except for the fact that she still couldn't contact Control. Entering Alcubierre space in 1 minute, she said. 30 seconds. 10. Entering Alcubierre space. The world around them stretched and squeezed again. The green light of Gaia faded, leaving a floating glass orb in the air behind Amber's head. The crew couldn't find any subjects that breached the uncomfortable feeling in the air, so their conversations remained short and awkward. They exited Alcubierre space above Earth. Several messages appeared on the screen through the satellite communications. Amber opened the communication request from Earth Space Control. Identify yourself, a voice said over the speakers on the ship. Amber Grayson, pilot and captain of the UHF Space Piercer. I am carrying Maxwell Nelliarmy, Jane Perlin, and a strange being calling itself Gaia. As she said its name, the orb lit up again. It moved closer to the speaker. I'm the one who made the letters in front of your UN conference building. We will land on the lawn. Make space. President Feldrum was currently flying to New York on Air Force One. Sir, we have received a message from a ship claiming to be the lost space piercer. They claim to be carrying a being called Gaia, who claims to be responsible for the anomaly outside the UN conference building. Where is it right now? The being claimed that the space piercer was going to land on the lawn of the conference building, and to make space for it. Let's get that done. Do we have any military assets in the region? 4 military bases and 1 carrier are ready to scramble fighter aircraft. The building's natural turret and laser defenses are fully active and prepared. The combat drones are on standby. When will we arrive? 10 minutes. We have begun widening the perimeter. The Russians have called for an emergency meeting at the New York building. Several world leaders are on their way. His informant handed him a folder. The briefing is in here, Mr. President. Call the Secretary of Defense. I want to get us some contingency plans. This is Tom Rears of the American News Network. We have several breaking news stories as we come on the air. First, the UHF Space Piercer, now missing for 2 days, has reappeared above New York. It is currently descending to the UN conference building, which is now under heavy security due to another story which we covered earlier. We have received word that the Russian Federation has called for an emergency meeting at the UN conference building in New York. Security is being heavily built up around the location. We are continually monitoring the situation for any updates. Thanks, Tom, a reporter said. The camera focused on them as they spoke again. Now for the weather. Joe, if you would. The camera panned to a well-dressed man in front of a map of America. As you can see here, the sky is incredibly clear across the country. California is getting a frosty 70 degrees behind the cold front, with 90s and 100s further south. There's another polar vortex over the Midwest, causing single-digit temperatures in much of the northern nation. Florida's still Florida, with rain predicted for the Keys and the Panhandle for the next 4 days as Tropical Storm Kathy rolls in. The storm is projected to create blizzard conditions in the New England region. The state of New York, where the president is going to arrive shortly, has mild 60-degree temperatures, with nearly no cloud cover in the whole state. Indeed, the only bits of America covered by clouds are near the west coast in Florida. I've got to say, guys, this year's been even more wild than the rest. The camera panned back to the 2 reporters sitting at a glass table. Next up, are the rumors about Hilly Nabatha really just rumors? We'll be back at 6 to discuss them, after these local messages. A few hours later, the space piercer was back on the ground. They'd been given orders to wait until the last of the world leaders showed up, as some had very long flights to New York. Amber was watching the news while Jane and Max were spending time together in the plant room. So apparently, the reporters were having a field day over all the news today. She wondered for a bit what would happen if they had never came back from the deep dark of the void. There would be news stories, but more likely a whimper than a bang. Gaia floated over to her. You look sad, they said softly. I'm sorry about this. I should have helped earlier. It's not that. I just don't like being dragged around like some sort of taxi driver. Gaia's soft light glowed brighter. I wanted to wait until we left the ship to reveal this, but you look like you really need some comfort right now. Amber looked at the floating orb. It disappeared for a fraction of a second before a person appeared at its place. Gaia was beautiful. She stood up and moved to embrace Gaia as the tears flowed. Gaia placed a soft hand on Amber's back. It's okay, Gaia said softly. I won't let them hurt you. Over the break, we've had some very interesting developments. The American president has now finished his speech, and met with the last of the leaders or diplomats from the rest of the world. The camera panned over to the space piercer as the doors opened. At the bottom left corner of the screen, the word live blinked in bright red text. There appears to be some movement from the space piercer, and wait, hold on. I can see someone coming out. The camera zoomed in on what appeared to be Amber Grayson. That's her all right, Tom said with a smile. And out comes Jane and Maxwell. Wow, they look better than I do in those flight suits. I'll need to snag one of those. Focus back on the ship, Tom. Let's get a new angle if we can. I believe the drone is now positioned. Tom looked back at the camera, fully aware that he was being watched by nearly 1 billion people. I'll find a way to get one of those uniforms. The camera blacked out for a second before switching to a drone feed showing a head-on view of the crew of the space piercer. What on earth? He whispered as the camera zoomed in. What is that? Laura, one of the reporters at the table, asked. Is that an alien? Similar exclamations were let out nearly simultaneously in several different languages across the world. Gaia stepped out of the space piercer, now fully clothed in a jumpsuit the color of tree bark. Gaia's light green skin clearly glowed. Dark green highlights ran down Gaia's ears and middle fingers. Gaia smiled, and black clouds formed around her head in a halo. Hello, humans, Gaia said. I am Gaia, progenitor of all life on this planet, and here to have some talks, do some partying, and advance us both. Gaia thrust their hands up into the air, and lightning flashed into the sky from their fingers. Thunder boomed, though not nearly as loudly as it should have, considering that it wasn't rupturing Tom's eardrums. Tom attempted to regain his composure. So, we've had our first human FTL flight, and now we've been contacted by a Greek god. More news at I'm not Greek, honey, Gaia said. Tom smiled. What are you then? A being that feeds off of all the nature on the planet. You humans are my source of entertainment nowadays. I always have a connection to each and every one of you. For example, I know that former President Langley is making some very suggestive looks at his television right now. I could also tell you all right now not to bother attacking my physical form. I'm here to have fun, not to kill, but I have no moral boundary when it comes to stupidity. And the Department of Defense Mindquake contingency won't work either. I'm here to talk. Do not imprison the explorers either. Have a good day, everyone. Let's get some things done. Gaia walked toward the entrance of the UN conference building and disappeared behind its reinforced doors. Well, that was an experience, Tom said. The camera panned back to the crew of the space piercer, who were now looking around with clear confusion. Amber took out a phone to call a driver, while Maxwell and Jane walked up to a security guard to ask for directions. Tom couldn't hear what they were saying, but attempted to shout over the rest of the reporters to get Amber's attention. Everyone wanted the first piece of a story or interview, and any reporter worth their salt would be here by now. Tom gave up on getting Amber's attention and turned back to the camera. Well, better luck next time, I guess. That's all, folks. Back to you, Joe. The video feed turned back to the newsroom. How the bleep do I follow that one? Joe asked, detecting a large increase in psychic particle emissions. The virtual intelligence, now carefully hidden in what it now knew was called the Kuiper Belt, roused itself again from its digital slumber. Extending thin sensors around the asteroid, it investigated the cause for the increase. Probability analysis. Psychospatial tear, 42%. Sentient psychic awakening, 31%. Undiscovered psychic anomaly, 15%. Trichek colony engine, 8%. Instrument error, 4%. Forwarding findings to Bureau of Military Affairs, the Bureau of Contact Affairs, and the Bureau of Scientific Studies. Further analysis required. Requesting further instructions. The virtual intelligence required more information. The third planet of System 2, 383-84927-1567, had a large amount of radio and laser emissions, clear signs of an intelligent civilization. It had not yet detected any military fleets in the system, and had therefore designated the civilization type 4. 2. The emissions were highly random and confusing, but there was some information gleaned. The sentients of the civilization were in the middle stages of solar colonization, with colonies on the moon of its homeworld and the fourth thin atmosphere planet. They were bipedal and sexually dimorphic, appeared to give live birth, and lacked natural weapons. Their organic structure showed that they carried a massive amount of bacteria in and on their bodies. Their strength and stamina were abnormal, but not insurmountable. They didn't appear to have shielding technology, as the only ships the probe observed were heavily armored. It had scanned one of the ships and noticed that they were heavily hardened against lasers and electromagnetic pulses. There were a massive amount of the sentients, nearly 11 billion spread between the three worlds. They appeared to call themselves people, dudes, or humans. The virtual intelligence moved its asteroid to a trajectory that would place it inside the orbit of the fourth planet. Closer monitoring of the civilization was required. 10 days later, the probe received a message. Send data every standard rotation. Investigative research ships are being sent. Estimates place arrival time at 394 standard years. Continue investigation of the system 2-383-84927-1567 civilization. Ascertain source of psychic particle emissions. If the dudes are found to be responsible, notify the Bureau of Military Affairs immediately. Amber sat against the wall in her apartment, watching a series. She liked nighttime. There was just something about sitting in the dark, wrapping herself up in a blanket, getting a few snacks, and binging on television shows. There was a flash on the screen. A burly and muscled man had thrown a grenade into a horde of zombies. Fake blood splattered as he proceeded to cut and slice his way through the rest with a sword. She shifted a bit. Amber had been sitting in the same position for far too long and was beginning to get sore. Pause, she said. The television stopped playing the show. She fumbled around for the remote a bit before turning it off. She brushed a few crumbs off her blanket and went to sleep. The next day, she received a package. Inside the cardboard was a holographic trophy. She turned it on and smiled as it displayed a little image of her ship orbiting the Earth. She looked to see who it was from. To my second best friend Amber, as a reminder of our companionship. It's been a wild ride. Here's to more. From Max. P.S. You might want to prepare for the reporters. They're coming your way now. Amber sighed. She needed more peace and quiet. Making history was all well and good. Being pestered for months about it wasn't. Technically, she hadn't made a first contact, though, since Gaia was also an Earthling. Speaking of Gaia, she wondered how they were doing. All the talk and news shows were clamoring to have them on. Gaia had indulged quite a few, sometimes two at once in completely different parts of the nation. So far, the general consensus on the internet about Gaia was a mix of lust and worry. Stuff like, well, we don't know Gaia's motives, but they must be a douchebag to let the Holocaust happen. And let's not forget the hundreds of millions of deaths from the Third World War and the millions from the Nipah 44 pandemic. As if Gaia was supposed to just hold humanity's hand. If Amber was in Gaia's shoes, she might have become detached from humanity as well. Though apparently not totally detached, as Gaia had spent some time in disguise in Finland, apparently. Something about laying low and keeping up with the times. On one of the talk shows, Gaia had said that they chose the name Gaia from reading up on human mythologies. Amber had been interested to know more about Gaia's history, but there were only so many interviews a girl could watch. Gaia had had a very serious talk with the world's leaders in the UN conference building last month. From what Amber had inferred, Gaia had basically told them, I'll give you some more technology to help you along, but if you think you can destroy me, think again. There had been an outpouring of gratefulness when crop yields began increasing, just as Gaia had said on one of the talk shows. More shipyards were beginning to be refit for orbital services as metal became more abundant. New ships were being built with the Alcubierre drives, which were capable of both FTL and sublight propulsion. Amber was set to go exploring in a new ship later in the month with Max and Jane, but that was after NASA put the finishing touches on their new ship, the UHF Green Bean. There had been a surge of internet memes about it after NASA's nationwide naming contest. Amber couldn't see a picture of a green bean anymore without laughing. Yunelzer was very bored. After getting a message from a deep space monitoring probe, the Bureau of Scientific Studies had asked for the military rapid response teams to send a ship within a rotation. The rapid response teams had played a planet-wide tournament of tail, tentacle, claw, or tooth to determine who was responsible for the many rotation journey deep into the void on the whim of a single virtual intelligence. It was a unique game, designed to be easy to win and hard to lose. The losers played each other until finally a very unhappy Yunelzer was selected. He'd gathered his people and set off for the void immediately, since the researchers were already ready. A few of them had been sent from the Bureau of Contact Affairs as well. Yunelzer's mandibles folded with sadness as he saw his planet recede into the dark. At least he had some companions to ease the loneliness a bit. But there was only so much to be done with 400 Venari between 7 ships. He sent one last message to her before the spatial jump speed passed the light barrier. He looked out into jump space, barely able to make out the specs of his escort. Well, he was the escort, really. There were 6 research vessels, and he was the ranking officer of a small military frigate. The rank 3 supervisors on the bridge booted up the ship's virtual intelligence to manage their trajectory, as well as communicate with the other ships in the jump. Unfortunately, now there was nothing to do but eat, sleep, crap, and of course game. He was already tired of gaming, and it was barely 2 standard rotations into the trip. The privilege of pleasure mating was reserved for the rank 0 and rank 1 Venari, while the higher-ups needed to keep their minds sharp as a hive queen's temper. As a rank 4, Anelzer was denied the right to breed for pleasure, which was a shame. He'd spotted a beautiful female whose hind legs looked so enticing, but she was a rank 2, so neither of them were allowed. Based on her pheromones, Anelzer could tell she wanted him too, but they both knew better than to break the rules. He clacked his forelimbs in displeasure. It was going to be a long ride. Maybe he'd find something good and get a pay increase. Maxwell had been enjoying his road trip. That was, of course, until he was caught in a sudden snowstorm in Kansas. He hadn't heard anything on the news about it just that morning. The car had suddenly slowed down, and Max saw the sky get darker. Big, wet snowflakes began falling on his windshield, causing the wipers to automatically activate. He sat up from where he'd been lying. The wind began howling. He suddenly became very concerned. He wasn't prepared if the car broke down in the middle of a blizzard. Sure, he had an emergency coat, flashlight, and blanket, but that wouldn't help much in 5-degree temperatures. For a few minutes, things were okay. Then the windows began fogging up. He'd just have to hope his car's sensors were up to the task of navigating through the blizzard. "You seem to be having trouble," a voice said. Max already knew who it was. "Are you just here to torment me?" he asked. "Of course not," Gaia said. They floated outside the windshield, bathing Max's face in a soft green glow. "I'm here to watch the storm torment you. I don't understand why you're doing this if you want me to like you. I don't care whether you like me. I'm just here for entertainment. I'm running out of patience for the talk shows and news segments, I'm afraid." "Hey, Gaia, are you a she or an it?" "Hey, Gaia, why did you let that one wave ruin my beachside picnic 40 years ago?" "Hey, Gaia, want to crawl into my bed so I can get you some real global warming?" "It's ridiculous." Max rolled his eyes. "If you don't want people to be attracted to you, just transform yourself into an old and wrinkled whale or something." "If only you knew the depths of your species' depravity," Gaia said. "Some of them would literally try to breed with an overly large toad." "So that's why people want you," Max muttered. The ground rumbled under him as Gaia laughed. "See, I'm definitely growing on you. That was the best joke I've heard all week. Let me give you a present." The snow began bending around the car as the wind suddenly changed. Max nodded. "Thanks for fixing your mess." Gaia laughed again. "I'm going to have so much fun with you all they disappeared." Max picked up his phone to call Jane. "Hello? You wouldn't believe the day I'm having sounds like you need something to eat." Max heard a snicker over the phone. "No, Jane, don't. How about some green beans?" Spatial jump detected. A query was sent to the probe as the virtual intelligence ran calculations to set up linked particle communication with the approaching vessel. The virtual intelligence didn't have feelings, but it did have priorities. Upon receiving identification for 6 research vessels, the probe identified itself. This unit is designated Interstellar Watcher 77 STNX 193, sending current location now. It received a signal soon after. This is Research Vessel Watcher of Space 392D. What is the reason for the change in location? The virtual intelligence determined the most likely answer the ship sought. Reason was the discovery of an FTL civilization, currently estimated to be in its beginnings. Additional anomalies of psychic nature denoting a high psychic intelligence are also currently under investigation. Transferring full data now. There was a long pause, and the probe returned to monitoring the system. There had been an increase in traffic over the past few human weeks, and it had detected 4 new spatial jumps in the period, though the technology had an error of 31.083% when it came to jump detections, which increased as the jump magnitudes became smaller. This is Enelzer of Military Frigate 1469-2H3. Send locations of known space military assets. The virtual intelligence hadn't detected many during all the time it had been watching the system. On the 3rd planet, there were 4 orbital stations which potentially carried weapons. It sent the orbital paths and current locations to the frigate. Maintain monitoring protocol. Watch as we attempt to make contact. If we are destroyed, send linked particle notifications to the Bureaus of Contact and Military Affairs. There will be no further communication. Enelzer out. Amber read the screens in the cockpit of the UHF Greenbean. She cringed every time she thought of the name. It had long overstayed its welcome. The fuel transfer and hull integrity were at 100% and 99.8%, respectively. A tiny asteroid had hit the top of the ship, doing little more than scrape off the paint. She had been guiding the Greenbean to a metal-rich asteroid for a few hours now. The Luna shipyards required ever-increasing amounts of metals for their new top-of-the-line military vessels. All Amber knew was that they were hidden in a particularly large lava tube nicknamed the Tapeworm by the brass. Many miles of regolith kept them hidden from prying eyes and radiation, while providing a launching bay for hundreds of ships at a time. Of course, there were probably only a few dozen there now, as all the ships had to be built from scratch with advanced tech. And that didn't even get into the expensive Alcubierre drives for the quicker vessels. The drives worked great for tugboats, though. Provided everything was inside the bubble, the Green Bean could haul nearly 500,000 tons of mass with it, only increasing as the speed became slower. Bigger Alcubierre bubbles were slower, unless more power was fed into them. Max had said that there were a few theories for anti-gravity tech based off of the Alcubierre bubbles, but as far as Amber and Jane knew, that was just hearsay. Amber stopped the ship. "We've matched the rock's trajectory. Jane, release the net once we get close enough." "Aye, aye, Captain," Jane replied over the ship's private communications network. She relied on the screen display to carefully pilot the Green Bean closer to the asteroid. It was good-sized, about 150 or so feet wide and 100 feet deep and long. According to their scans, it had a great deal of platinum within it. They'd get a good bonus for this one. "Deploying net," Jane said. "Acknowledged." "Max, how are things on your end? Anything out of the ordinary?" "Nope. We're the only ones around for hundreds of miles. Scanners have a small micrometeorite cluster headed our way, though. It's moving at around 4 miles a second relative to us, but since it's highly reflective, we've got 22 minutes before it hits. Let's round that down to 20. The net only needs 5 minutes for something this size, so we'll be fine." "Sounds good," Amber said. "Jane, tell me when it's done." It was a long 6 minutes. The terrain of the asteroid was rougher on the net's wheels than expected. "Asteroid secured," Jane said. "All right, let's get this rock back to Luna." Amber activated the Alcubierre drive and leaned back in her seat. Another toy for Luna's little operation, she thought. Gaia was indulging in the Christmas party being thrown in New York. Confetti was a given, but the thing they loved most was the little lights that the humans had hung everywhere. It was like the night sky, but a great deal more ordered and loud. Gaia smiled as another child ran out of their parents' arms to gawk at them. "Wow, are you really glowing? That's so cool! Can you teach me?" "Rory, you can't just run up to random people on the street," the boy's mother said. She walked over and smiled at Gaia. "Sorry about that. You must get that a lot. I'm not a goddess or anything, but I know children can wear you down after a few hours," she said. "You're definitely a goddess," her husband said, causing the mother to blush all the way down to her scarf. Gaia laughed. "I see you two are going great, and I'm happy to be given such a warm welcome by such lovely children." "That we are! Say, did you already have a meal? There's a big bake-off going on in the Christmas palace. Want to go meet Santa with little Rory here?" the husband said. Gaia didn't know his name, since the whole "I am everywhere" talk was more to keep people from attacking than actually a real measure of Gaia's abilities. Of course. "Now take me to Gaia," looked up into the sky. A large boom resounded above them. Rory squeaked with fear. 6 more booms lit up the night, bathing the sky in bright light for an instant. Gaia looked at the boy's parents and said, "Keep him safe." Then Gaia flew up into the air, oblivious to the gasps of the crowd. Gaia looked around, trying to identify the source of the explosions. Bright flares rose up into the sky from the buildings which had flat roofs. Loud explosions split the sky, bursting in Gaia's vision with greens, reds, whites, and occasionally other colors. Ah, of course. "Fireworks," Gaia said, laughing at their bit of paranoia. High in orbit of the third planet of System 2383, 84,927.1567, Inelser sent a few communications to the research ships. When he'd arrived within the orbit of the third planet's moon, his ship's sensors had sent him warnings of explosions. Inelser wasn't a warmonger, so he wanted to be sure before starting a war with an unknown species. "Captain, the rank 4 scientists of the research vessels believe that the explosions in the planet's lower atmosphere are not a military attack." Inelser flitted his wings in relief. "Then what are they?" "They appear to be celebratory. According to the calendar data from the probe, this rotation appears to coincide with a holiday that these humans call Christmas. What's the origin of this holiday?" One of their life faiths believes that this day marks the birth of a man named Jesus, who is apparently the son of an extremely powerful being known as God. "Do you think that this God could explain the psychic anomaly?" "Well, we're still not sure about that. The psychic emissions seem to be clustered upon their largest cities, though there is one instance that is nearly right beneath us. We should contact the Bureau of Contact Affairs on this," Inelser said. "We've tried, but for some reason, there is interference with our linked particle communications." Inelser felt his blood go cold. Everything was fine. There was no reaction from the planet below, and yet he couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. It was an ominous feeling, and he struggled to find the cause. "Captain, what do you suggest we do?" a rank 3 scanner watcher asked. "We should continue to observe them. After this holiday ends, we will make first contact. There is another holiday in 7 of their planetary rotations from now called New Year's Day. According to what I've been able to view on their networks, it will be an apt occasion for our introduction to occur. That sounds good. We'll stick to that, Inelser said. Mr. President, a voice called. President Feldrum stood up as the door to the Oval Office opened. Several Secret Service agents entered the room. His regular informant was holding a red folder. Though he and Feldrum were somewhat close, Feldrum never knew his real name. After all, John Tanner was most definitely a pseudonym. There was a small camera in the room where he would pre-record his New Year's Day address. The time was right, after all. The economy was going strong again after nearly a decade of labor shortages, and the Luna colony had just reached its 10 million population benchmark, nearly half a year ahead of schedule. It had been a great year besides the whole Gaia debacle. We've received word from NASA that 7 UFOs have been detected in high orbit of Earth. The UN is conducting a secret emergency conference in 50 minutes. Have the other space agencies and Luna detected anything? The objects are inside Luna's orbit, sir. President Feldrum's eyes widened. What are they doing right now? Nothing. One of them is heavily armored and equipped with railguns and possibly lasers. Is my wife safe? Government officials are being relocated to secure locations. There's a full briefing of theoretical capabilities in this folder here. I'm here to get you to the bunker, sir. Feldrum frowned. Well, time to talk about our Grinch. After the ball dropped, Tom Rears had thought he was finished with news. Then, on the day after New Year's, the phone rang at 9 a.m. We're going to need you to come in, Henry, his boss, had told him. Tom wanted to argue, but knew that at time like this, Henry only interfered with his vacation time if it was something serious. We're prepared to give you full compensation, Henry said, as Tom rose out of his bed. What the situation? Gaia found us some new friends, replied Henry with a laugh. Ripped 7 ships out of the sky and onto Old Central Park. Old Central Park? But that's not safe for years. The radiation's still too high. Gaia somehow fixed the radiation there after bringing the ships down. It's all Geiger verified, moved all the old debris too. So what's the deal with the ships? We've got FTL, everyone knows that. Well, it's aliens. What? Yeah. Suit up, Tom. We've got the 3rd story of the century. There's aliens here. They're still in their ships, but the instruments and guns are completely whacked, so it's not us. The whole internet's melting down over it. We've got parties, riots, the whole lot. A helicopter landed on his lawn, which was thankfully large enough for such an accommodation. Get to the chopper, my friend. We've got actual aliens down here. President Feldrum was on his way to New York, where the aliens had landed. The old city of New York didn't have any nearby airports, and security had to be organized, so he knew it would take some time to meet the aliens. The First Lady was with him as well, as befitting an occasion such as this. There was going to be a lot of information to discuss with the aliens, assuming communication was possible. Gaia had explained that the reason the ships were taken from orbit was to make the aliens more likely to seek a peaceful solution. Since the power of the alien weapons was unknown, it was best to put them in a situation where firing them would cause damage to their own ships as well. Margaret Feldrum was discussing the implications of alien contact with him. She was very fascinated with science fiction stories, to the point where she was probably going to be nearly as good at navigating strange social blunders as his newly assembled contact team. Though if Feldrum was honest with himself, he figured that the media would get the first dig at it. They could move like light itself when they sniffed out a good story. And of course, alien contact was a very good story. The problem of the situation was that there were too many leaders. Every country wanted a piece of the alien contact, which was made known at the UN meeting. Even Luna and Mars's governments had asked for representation. Their current representatives were also en route to old New York City. Feldrum sighed, falling deep into thought. Having first contact in the ruins of one of Earth's greatest cities was going to send a whole lot of messages. To the world, the other worlds, and the aliens, if they knew the history behind it. World War III was a shameful event for everyone involved. To think it had all started over the most basic resource to life itself, water. So many lives lost, nearly 400 million casualties, not counting those from the long-term radiation and starvation. Let's just hope the aliens are peaceful, Feldrum thought. Yunelzer asked, what do we know so far about the psychic anomaly? Well, it's not that simple, a rank 3 scientist said. It needs to get real simple, real quick. The being that dragged us to the planet's surface is not actually the cause of the psychic waves. When we observed it as it came closer to us, we observed a large amount of psychic potential, but this does not account for the scale of the anomaly. I believe that the humans or another animal they domesticated carry psychic potential. You told me about the high bacteria content of the humans. Is it possible one of these is the cause? Without further study, I cannot guess either way. But in the known galaxy, there is no bacterial entity capable of generating psychic potential. It is rare even high in evolution chains, only evolving on true death worlds. This world is not a death world. No. It has only 63% of the gravity necessary for the death world threshold. Far too low a uniform heat level for a Type 2 death world, but far too high a uniform heat level for a Type 3 death world. The two largest thick atmosphere planets qualify for Type 1 death worlds. So hostile to life, not even bacteria have been found naturally there. Only the Trichic have single psychic entities, but they live on a Type 4 death world, which was once habitable but has become tidally locked to its star and bathed with intense radiation. They are adapted for high heat and low heat environments, but require much thicker air than the galactic standard. In the absence of such conditions, we are well and truly stumped with the psychic emissions of this species. Does it have to do with this Gaia? It may. From what's available on their network, if we assume it is true, then perhaps the focused wrath of a planetary scale entity could have achieved this somehow. Though if this is the case, I recommend friendly contact immediately. Why is that? I have seen human videos of their wars. Watch their D-Day invasion on an empty stomach. Once you wrap your head around that, if you are able, watch the Crimes of Three Superpowers, Humans as Animals documentary. Avoid the footage behind their videos labeled 18 plus as well, unless you want to see things your mind is not ready for, the rank 3 scientist said. Her given name, Greer Milken Pekps Kax, was troublesome for even Anelser to pronounce. She usually went by Konpek for simplicity. After recounting a mildly broken description of those horrific events to me, one of my rank 2 information gatherers committed suicide. I have provided the rest of my information gatherers priority counseling services from our psychologists. One of our ship's virtual intelligences has given the footage a level 8 psychological hazard rating, and we have observed changes within its code and voice. The current theory is that this virtual intelligence is saddened. Deeply. The human word for it is depressed, I think. That's all I have to report. You know the rest, Kanpek said, growing visibly distressed as she finished. Yinelzer shuddered. May the fates save us. The translators are set up, yes? Kanpek rubbed her forelegs together and unfurled her wings to flap them a few times. Yes. So, who are we deciding to have walk out onto the planet to give talks? An important question. I suggest you bring 2 officers and 4 guards, and I will assemble a force of scientists from each vessel. Most likely, we're getting the xenopsychologists and xenobiologists as well. We will coordinate our exits in 1/10 of a standard rotation. Amber was hauling a new rock into the Luna shipyards when she heard the news. Aliens, guys! Actual aliens! Jane nodded. It's all over the nets. All the armchair historians and every science channel's running a story on it. There hasn't been this much of a frenzy since Gaia's reveal. Where is Gaia? Max asked, walking into the room. We don't know. Wait, something's up. The screen flashed, and the speakers of the green bean were overridden. This is Luna Control. All ships in the area, with the exception of those with asteroids in tow, are to dock immediately. Failure to do so will result in loss of pilot licenses and fines upwards of $200,000. I repeat, this is Luna Control. All ships. They looked at each other as the message continued. Amber shrugged and kept the ship on course for the mouth of the tapeworm. They had an asteroid in tow, so they were safe. Plus, Amber wanted to get a look at the military's secretive preparation efforts. Are we doing this, guys? We're doing it, both Max and Jane said. Amber steered them into the tunnel as she slowed their speed down to 30 miles per hour. When they got deep enough into the tunnel, bright white light shined onto their ship. The flash protection of the cockpit compensated, allowing the crew to get a good look at the very big guns now pointed their way. Those weren't there last time we were here, Jane said. I remember the large boxes they're mounted on being there before. I think they're retractable. They received a transmission. UHF Green Bean. Slow your speed to 2 meters a second and navigate down to unloading yard 32. We can see you have a large asteroid in tow, so we won't sweat you. Don't do anything stupid. Control out. Well, time to go get us some dough, Amber said. Tom Rears had arrived at the site, currently under military control. They'd moved quite quickly once it was known where the ships would land. So far, nothing was known about the aliens except for size estimates based on internal scans of the ships. His news drone was up in the air, capturing pictures and video of the alien ships from above. Combat drones were deployed in a thick perimeter around the ships, isolating them from the eyes of the world. But Tom knew how to maneuver his drones to get some clear images. A disturbance made the military officers and soldiers begin shifting and shouting. Tom guessed that the president or something was coming. More military trucks and other hardware arrived every few minutes, and the perimeter continually widened. The doors to the ship opened. Laura, who had been narrating the current events, had gone silent. The combat drone stopped moving as well, allowing Tom a much easier time of getting video. He had the closest drone zoom in on the prickly-looking ship. There was a rumble under everyone's feet. Tom steadied himself as he activated his noise-canceling headphones for a bit as everyone yelled and struggled. Everyone who wasn't military were under strict orders not to speak after the aliens came out of their ships. So the reporters remained silent as the doors to 3 of the ships opened. Tom pointed his handheld camera at the vessels to capture more high-quality footage. Green light shone from the ground, and he watched in awe as Gaia rose up out of the ground, clothed in a truly gorgeous green and black dress. Even though he knew Gaia was genderless, with their appearance it was truly difficult not to call Gaia a woman. He refocused his camera on Gaia as small pillars of stone rose from the ground. Gaia placed a foot on each one, and stone flowed into the shape of high heels around their feet. A loud shriek echoed from the ship again. The military officers had refocused their soldiers to the ship's entrance with a few shouts. Tom noticed that a great deal of the soldiers were not pointing their rifles directly at the ships, rather keeping them pointed towards the ground. A sensible plan. Don't want our first contact to start a war. Gaia raised their left hand in front of them in greeting as the aliens exited the ships. They looked sort of like grasshoppers mixed with praying mantises, bees, and ants. They had heads that were roughly similar to that of a mantis, but their bodies were very different. They did wear clothes, but from what Tom could see, there was space in the back for a set of wings. They had 2 antennae and very large eyes on their heads. Their bodies were more shaped like grasshoppers. Front limbs that were serrated, while they walked on 4 thin legs. Their very back legs also appeared the strongest, as they had the most clear musculature, almost like human thighs. They had abdomens which ended in stingers which were uncovered. They glinted in the sunlight before the aliens retracted the stingers. The alien that appeared to lead them stood up, confirming Tom's thoughts about their hind legs. Its wings unfurled, eliciting gasps from the gathered crowd. Apparently, even the soldiers were surprised by this. The alien in charge spread themselves out a bit, striking a few poses before continuing. Its wings folded back to their original positions. I bet those guys can fly, Tom thought. A loud message blared from the ships as the lead alien's mandibles moved. Hello, humans. I am Yunelzer of the Venari Empire. I have come from far away to have the honor of being your first contact. We are sure you have many questions. We have many paths ahead of us, and it is my sincere hope that one day, humanity will join us in the stars.